Hello and welcome to Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy. I'm your host Leo, and this week we're actually out of Spooky Month. But we're keeping up the kind of horror vibes with Jaws. Now, Jaws is considered one of, if not the first blockbuster film. And it is also one of those classic Hollywood success stories of, trials and tribulations. The fucking animatronic didn't work, so they had to hide it a lot more in the actual film because it also looked a bit shit. So, in the end, boom, it's a big success despite all the troubles. Yay. It's not a success story that you hear much anymore, and while the suspense of the film still works, the effects are kind of meh, and the shark does look shit. The story is a lot more slow burning. Now, of course, I think that the book, which is actually a relatively short book, was also kind of slow burning, but I don't know. I haven't read it. So, Jaws. I've seen this film a few times throughout my life, and I've always thought that it's okay. It's one of those series where they say, hey, the first one is fantastic, but everyone after that's kind of shit. I've heard it said about Jaws, I've heard it said about Starship Troopers, I've heard it said about Tremors, and Aliens, kind of. It's more after the second one, it gets really shit, but yeah. The idea is that this is around the era where the first one's really, really good, and then almost everyone after that gets really, really bad, because at that point it becomes a cash grab situation where they're not making it because they're like, oh, we can make a really cool, interesting movie. It's, hey, the first one did really good, so let's make more of those. But, yeah. Overall, it's still a pretty good movie, if a little dated by now, but it still works pretty good. So the movie opens up with a title sequence where it goes through all of the cast as it's going through the water. And then it opens up with a scene of some late night beach goers wanting to go for a bit of a skinny dip. One girl goes out and is trying to beckon someone into the water. We then start to follow the shark as it goes and attacks her. This sets off a major chain of events leading to the plot of the film. So, now this scene is actually a little bit of a mixture of silly and, tense. As a lot of, horror movies from this era were. They run off into the ocean. Well, she runs off to the ocean. And as she's running, she's stripping. And the guy's drunkenly trying to follow her, also stripping, but doing a bit more of a shit job at it. He ends up tumbling down a hill and is fighting with a shoe when he just kind of passes out on the beach. Now, it's one of those things where you're like, oh man, after they were done swimming and doing whatever they were going to do, it would be so annoying to go then have to walk up the beach in reverse, regathering your clothes. That would be so bad. But yes, she's swimming in the water and she's calling out to him and ends up getting attacked by the shark and just kind of dragged around. And for a while, it just kind of looks like she's more confused than actually terrified. Like, you can see the terror building in her, but she's just kind of being, like, moved around in the water, and she's like, wait, what? Panicking a bit. But only after a little while does she actually start freaking out, which you would think if she's being bitten by a shark, she would freak out a hell of a lot more. It makes it seem more like, instead of the shark eating her, the shark just drowns her. Like, it lightly grips her and, like, moves her around a bit, and then just slowly pulls her under the water. It's a little bit silly. But anyway, then we meet our main character for the film, Sheriff Martin Brody. Brody and his family had recently moved to Amity, and they were still settling in, even though they had bought the house in the fall, and it is now summer. He's given a call on one of the 2 kitchen phones that they have, and goes out to the beach to help look for the girl. Now, one of the guys from the party, potentially the guy that was drunk, it's kind of hard to tell, is trying to give Brody the rundown of like what might have happened. He suggests that she might have drowned, but Brody thinks that she just kind of ran out on him while he passed out. As they're going, another police officer starts blowing his whistle further down the beach. Having found her, they run up and see that she is very dead and has washed up on the shore. The coroner determines that what killed her was a shark attack, and Brody then starts pushing for the beach to be closed. But, this being the height of tourist season, the mayor refuses to close the beach, saying, it's probably fine, we'll just keep an eye out. So Brody and his family go to the beach. While they're sitting there, the shark attacks and kills a few people. A town meeting is then held to see what they're going to do about this shark issue. They start setting traps and bait to try and capture the shark. And a bunch of fishermen also then go out to hunt the shark when they think that they've found it. And they do indeed kill a shark and bring it in. But after examining the contents of the stomach and the general size of the shark, they deem this to not be the shark. But the mayor, having a quote-unquote answer to his problem, a shark has been killed, huzzah, decides to let things kind of go on anyway. But Brody and company, a scientist by the name of Hooper, and a shark hunter, go out to get the shark, at least start planning to get the shark themselves. But they don't do anything until after yet another shark attack happens. Because only then are they actually given proper permission to at least go hunt the shark. So they set out on their boat, chumming the water and whatnot, trying to get the shark. And this is where a lot of the slow burn for this film happens, is while they're kind of hunting the shark. And they're just kind of chilling on the boat, talking about stuff, just hanging out, doing guy things. When they do eventually actually see the shark and are able to start trying to pin it with buoys, but the shark is very big and is able to, fight the buoys. But after they get a couple pinned into it, they have a big struggle with the shark and fight it. In the process, the shark hunter does eventually end up dying after the boat starts getting destroyed. And Brody, after they are able to get a gas canister put into the shark's mouth, like it tries to eat it, he's able to shoot it, blowing up the shark. Him and Hooper survive, just kind of floating there in the ocean. Now, this is a fairly simple film overall. I mean, that's kind of what happens with a lot of short story-based movies, is that the plot is overall quite simple. The book plot, from everything I hear, is a little bit more complicated and a lot more convoluted, but it's one of those things where you just kind of have to roll with it a bit. Now, this film, I believe part of the reason that it grew so much in popularity is, one, the time it was made and the level of suspense that it does try to muster. There's a lot of frustration that you feel as the audience member that you can share with Brody, as, the mayor refuses to shut down the beach after 2 consecutive attacks. And, the fact that people still go to the beach after 2 consecutive attacks. But hey. And then afterwards, when they're actually hunting the shark, there's a nice kind of build of tension that... Then there's, when they're actually hunting the shark, there's, a nice build of tension that gets abruptly cut off when the shark kind of surprise attacks them. So I will say that, especially for the time, it was a very good suspense builder. But it's kind of hard to summarize easily because it is a fairly... It's kind of hard to summarize easily because it is a fairly simple film, at least on the surface of things. But yeah, overall, it's not bad. It's a quite good film. It's definitely a classic and deserves to be watched. But it is, I believe, really showing its age. I mean, you can still look at it as like, it's very novel for what it was and everything, but it is starting to kind of age a bit and fray around the edges. And like when I was a kid and I heard like, oh, this is like one of the most terrifying horror movies ever, and it like makes you terrified of the ocean. And then I watched it and I was like, man, this is kind of boring because it's just slow and drawn out. I think that's why I ended up glomming onto The Thing so much, is because it was like, oh, this is actually like something happening and it's interesting. Where this one is just like a shark is being weird. And then what they do for the sequels, where they bring back specifically this shark, like, oh yeah, no, it didn't die in that massive explosion that it died in. No, it survived that. And then in even later films, it's just like, yeah, now its family is also out for revenge for you having killed one of its members, I guess. And it's specifically hunting down this family. It's like they're trying to add too much lore to the fucking shark attack. It's so weird. I think that's part of the reason why movies like Sharknado kind of got popular, is like they lean into... They take the kind of cheesiness that the Jaws films became and follow it to its logical conclusion of leaning even further into just the stupidity of everything. Like, oh yeah, not only do the sharks want specific revenge, but now they've become like this weird hive mind tornado thing and are falling through the air. Like, the Sharknado movies, they leaned in, and then they leaned in a little too far, and then even farther too far. But that's beside the point. I'll probably not even have a chance to actually like touch the Sharknado movies, so this is probably my only opportunity to actually talk about them at any point, because there's just so much other stuff I have to cover as time goes on, which might include the Jaws sequels. I don't know. Probably not, because this is probably one of the ones where I definitely agree that, yeah, the later ones just kind of get really bad. Because they also just run out of budget as well. Like, they don't get nearly the amount of budget that this film had. And this film, even with its massive budget, had to extremely limit how much you saw the shark because the animatronics were failing. And the shark looked like garbage. But, yeah. Anywho, with that said... I think we're going to go ahead and leave it there. It's going to be a bit of a short episode, but that's fine. If you guys like this, feel free to give it a like, comment, and subscribe. If you are listening on YouTube, or if you're listening on any podcast catcher of your choice, feel free to rate, review, and share it with your friends. Otherwise, next week we are talking Starship Troopers. So look forward to that. With that said, though, once again, thank you guys so much for listening, and I will talk to you guys next week. Goodbye.